The invitation arrived folded beneath a stack of manuscripts and coffee-stained proofs. Grace Linwood hadn't noticed it until after her third cup of lukewarm tea. When her eyes caught the shimmer of silver foil lettering, she pulled it out cautiously, expecting it to be another publishing event, or perhaps a book launch. But when she unfolded the heavy cardstock, her breath hitched. The Waldmere Foundation cordially invites you to its annual winter gala, hosted at the Waldmere Grand Hotel Ballroom. Grace stared at the RSVP card like it had fallen from another universe. And then came the sticky note in her boss's hurried scribble. Can't make it, you go. Just smile. Represent the company, Ella. Grace glanced at the date. Tonight, less than 8 hours from now. Her first instinct was to decline, to make up an excuse. She was a junior editor, not someone who attended galas with crystal chandeliers and dress codes. But then she remembered Ella's trust and the chance it might be to meet authors, agents, people who breathe stories like she did. By 5:30, she was in her tiny studio apartment, digging through her friend Kaylee's closet. This one, Kaylee said, pulling out a vintage silk navy dress. It was elegant in its simplicity, with a delicate neckline and soft sleeves. Grace held it up, doubtful. I'll look like a bridesmaid someone forgot to seat. Kaylee rolled her eyes. You look like Grace Linwood, mysterious literary. Girl with words sharper than diamonds. Now go, be seen. The dress fit. Barely, but it was enough. By 7, Grace stepped into the Grand Waldmere Hotel and was swallowed by gold pillars, mirrored walls, and the symphony of clinking glasses. The ballroom buzzed with glamour. Women in designer gowns, men in velvet suits, glittering shoes, perfumes that smelled like wealth. She walked cautiously through the crowd, hoping no one would notice the scuff on her heels or the fact that her clutch was actually a borrowed makeup bag. By 8, she had been smiled at, nodded to, and mostly ignored, so she slipped outside. The balcony overlooked Manhattan. Down below, traffic shimmered like moving constellations. The night wind curled around her bare shoulders, sharp and cold. She wrapped her arms tight, trying not to shiver. You'll freeze out here. The voice was deep but soft, with a hint of amusement. She turned. A man tall, dressed in a fitted black suit, stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets. Eyes were dark, intense, but not unkind. Grace smiled weakly. Needed air. Didn't expect it to be this arctic. He stepped forward, unbuttoning his jacket. Here, he said, holding it out. Grace hesitated. I can't take it. I insist. She slipped it on. It was warm, expensive, and far too big, the sleeves falling past her hands. The collar smelled faintly of citrus and cedar. Thank you, she murmured. He nodded once. Enjoy the view, he said, and walked back inside without waiting for her name. She stood there, baffled. A stranger with kindness, no expectations, no smooth pickup line. When she finally returned inside, she searched for him, but in a room full of tuxedos and glitter. He disappeared like a mirage. She wandered, sipping champagne she could barely pronounce until she found herself near the bar. Hey, mystery girl, said a familiar voice. She turned, and there he was, up close. His features were more striking, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and a smile that felt both private and public. I hope the jacket's working, he added. It's saving my life, actually, she replied, offering a more relaxed smile now. You're like a walking coat rack. I've been called worse. They sat at the edge of the bar, away from the clinking conversations and polished arrogance. Grace didn't ask his name, and he didn't ask for hers. They talked about the music, about why shrimp cocktails were always cold, and how half the people there didn't actually know what charity the gala supported. I work in publishing, she offered eventually. Nothing fancy, mostly editing, but I love stories, especially messy ones. He nodded thoughtfully. Messy ones are the most honest. What about you? She asked, sipping. Let me guess. You're secretly a poet trapped in a finance job. He laughed. Close. I build things. Mostly with code. A tech guy? Something like that. She liked how he said it. Not bragging, not pretending, just facts. As the night went on, she forgot where she was. They shared a plate of Minnie. Tartsy asked about her favorite authors. She told him about the manuscript she was secretly writing at night. He listened. Not the way most people did, waiting to talk, but really listened. In the far corner, a small group of well-dressed guests whispered and laughed, glancing at her. She heard one woman, a blonde in a gleaming red dress, whisper something sharp. But Grace kept her smile steady. One of the photographers moved past them, lifting his camera instinctively. "May I?" Grace blinked. Before she could answer, the flash went off. A click. Just one photo, her in a borrowed dress and a stranger's jacket, laughing beside a man she barely knew. A frozen moment. Later, when the night wound down and she prepared to leave, she reached for the jacket. He stopped her. "Keep it. Just until tomorrow, consider it on loan." "But how will I return it?" "I'll find you," he said, smiling as the crowd swirled behind him. And with that, Grace walked into the night, the jacket wrapped around her like a question she didn't yet know how to answer. Grace Linwood had never trended on the internet. She wasn't even sure she wanted to, but there she was, staring at a blurry, overexposed photograph of herself on one of Manhattan's most notorious gossip pages. Who's the mystery girl in Nathan Hale's jacket? Billionaire spotted. Getting cozy with an unknown beauty at the Waldmere Gala, her mouth went dry. Her phone buzzed again. Another friend sent a screenshot, Kaylee called Grace. "Grace, you didn't tell me the jacket guy was Nathan freaking Hale?" Grace stared blankly at her screen. Nathan Hale. "Grace, are you kidding me? The man is basically Silicon Valley's crown prince. The youngest billionaire in the city. That's him in the photo. He's wearing the same jacket." Her pulse skipped. The stranger from the balcony. The quiet guy at the bar who shared lemon tarts and stories about messy lives. He hadn't introduced himself, and now she understood why. Grace dropped her phone on the bed. The jacket still hung on the back of her chair, as expensive and foreign as everything else that night had been. She folded it slowly, placed it in a clean gift bag, and scribbled a note. "Thank you for the jacket. I didn't realize who you were, but I'm grateful for your kindness." Grace, no last name, no contact. Just enough she called Hale Dynamics' main office line, mostly expecting a wall of receptionists or automated prompts. But someone answered, took the message, promised to deliver the jacket to Mr. Hale's assistant. Done, she thought. Back to normal. But the next morning, Grace received an email from someone named Ellis Morn with the subject line, "Lunch Invitation." For Mr. Hale, she nearly deleted it, assuming it was a prank, but something about the tone was too precise. Too real? Mr. Hale would appreciate the chance to return your kindness over lunch. "If you're free this afternoon, a car will be sent." Please confirm. Grace hesitated, and then, with trembling fingers, she typed, "Okay, I'll come." The bistro wasn't what she expected. Tucked between two brick buildings in Soho, it had no flashy signs, just a small chalkboard and outdoor tables wrapped in ivy. It looked more like a writer's nook than a billionaire's haunt. Nathan stood by the door when she arrived. No suit today, just a navy sweater, dark jeans, and the same easy calm she remembered. "You came," he said, smiling. "I wasn't sure if I should. I wasn't sure you would." They sat by the window, sunlight warming the small table between them. The waiter brought water, menus, and a quiet smile, clearly familiar with Nathan, but not deferential. Grace sipped nervously. "So, billionaire?" he grimaced. "I was hoping you wouldn't open with that. You didn't mention it. I liked being just Nathan. It felt real. You were the first person all night who looked me in the eye and didn't talk about apps or mergers or my portfolio." She smiled faintly. "That's because I thought you were a coat rack." He laughed, a real laugh, not the polite kind. "I'm sorry for the media nonsense," he said. "My life tends to leak. It's okay. I returned your jacket. I got it. But I wanted to return something else." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folded card. She opened it. "Your stories matter, messy ones most. Of all, I'd love to read them." Grace blinked. It was her own quote, The one she said on the balcony. You remembered. I listened. Lunch came small plates, warm bread, espresso. They talked about old bookstores and bad coffee. She told him about her mother's recipe box, how every recipe was taped to the back of a grocery receipt. He told her about his grandfather, who taught him to code on a second-hand computer they could barely afford. I didn't always have what I have now, Nathan said quietly. That night, you reminded me of that kid again. Grace looked at him, her heart tugging. Why me? Because you made me feel normal. They met again the next week, and the week after that. Not at galas, not at luxury clubs, but in small places. They walked along Riverside Park at dusk, sipping takeaway coffee, arguing about favorite poets. He showed up at her favorite bookstore, bought the ugliest fantasy paperback she recommended, and read it just to tease her. He never once acted like he was someone else. With her, he was just Nathan, a little awkward, a little guarded, always sincere. One evening, he took her to a rooftop garden hidden atop a library. It wasn't public, but he'd helped fund its construction, and the curator let them in after. Hours, they lay on a bench under a sky littered with stars and city light. Grace asked, Isn't this? I don't know, strange. You're one of the richest men in America, and I'm me. He turned to her. Just say that like it's a bad thing. I just mean our worlds don't match. Maybe the problem is the world, he said. What? Us. She wanted to believe him. But doubt lived in the corners of her heart. Whispering warnings, then came the invitation. A formal envelope hand-dashed delivered, private fundraiser. Limited guests, black tie. Hosted by Hale Foundation. Please join me. Grace called Kaylee in a panic. I can't go to another event like that. The last time I barely survived. It was a walking tabloid headline. But this time Kaylee said, You're walking in with Nathan Hale. It didn't make her feel better. She wore a sleek black gown. Kaylee had helped her rent. Elegant, modest. More her, Nathan met her outside the venue. This time, he looked more like the man in the headline's crisp tux. Polished shoes, hair styled to perfection. You look beautiful, he said simply. Inside, the room bloomed with elegance. Powerful names and magazine faces swirled like champagne. Grace walked beside Nathan, her hand in his. But the stares followed. The whispers weren't kind at the bar. Bryn, the socialite from the Gala, found her. Well, Bryn said, lips curved. Our little Cinderella again. I'm surprised you're still around. Grace smiled tightly. Good too. See you too. Bryn leaned in. Just remember, sweetie, glass slippers break easily. And Nathan, well, he has a history of collecting broken ones. Grace stepped away, her heart pounding. When Nathan found her a few minutes later, her hands were cold. What happened? She shook her head. Nothing. It's fine. Grace. She looked up, eyes stinging. Nathan. This isn't me. I'm not polished. I'm not powerful. I'm just a girl who edits novels and wears borrowed dresses. He frowned. No one has to belong anywhere. That's a made-up rule. Maybe. But it still hurts. To leave, she didn't want to cry in front of him. Not in that room. Not surrounded by people who looked at her like she was a stain on a silk napkin. She made it halfway down the corridor before she heard footsteps. Grace, he called softly. She turned slowly. I don't care what anyone else sees, he said, walking up to her. I care what I see. And you see me? Not Nathan Hale, the CEO, not the billionaire, just me. That matters. She swallowed hard. It's not easy. Being around you, I know, but I'm here. Not because of noise or status, because of you. She looked up, unsure, torn. He took a step closer. Do you want to run away? What? Now? With me? Now. Where? Anywhere. There's a bookstore 2 blocks away. Or a late-night pancake place on 9th. Grace stared. The city hummed behind them, but everything narrowed into this one question. And she whispered, Pancakes. He grinned. They ran through the snow-dusted streets in their black tie outfits. People stared. Some recognized him. No one recognized. her, but she didn't care anymore. They sat in a red booth under fluorescent lights, eating pancakes with syrup and too much butter. She laughed until she snorted. He told her about his worst investor meeting ever, which involved a parrot, a fire alarm, and a misfired prototype. At midnight, she reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm still scared," she said. "I am too," he whispered. They sat there, two people from different orbits, quietly choosing the same path. The city moved faster in spring. Grace Linwood noticed it most in the way the sunlight lingered longer across the rooftops, and how Central Park filled with soft laughter instead of icy silence. Life for her had changed, and not in a dramatic, glass-slipper way. There were no front-page fairy tales or diamond rings catching flashes. Instead, it shifted in quiet, powerful ways, like the way she now wrote her own words without apology, or how she no longer looked at herself like someone waiting to be chosen. Nathan Hale had never tried to change her world. He had simply invited her into his, and now she was ready to walk beside him. Not behind, not below, but beside. They had spent the last few months finding a rhythm that wasn't defined by the flashing lights of cameras or the buzzing chaos of headlines. Nathan made space for her in his schedule, in his apartment, in the corners of his guarded heart. And Grace. She had stopped shrinking, stopped apologizing for dreaming beyond her small editorial cubicle. She had published her first short story in a well-respected literary journal. The editor-in-chief had even asked to see more. Kaylee cried when she read it. Nathan too, though he swore it was allergies. But even amid the peace, doubt still echoed in Grace's mind. Sometimes, when the city was too quiet, she wondered, how long could a girl who once borrowed a dress keep walking with a man who owned entire skylines? She never asked him aloud. Not directly. But Nathan saw the question in her eyes whenever someone whispered too loudly or blinked too slowly when they realized who she was. Then came another envelope. This time, not hand-delivered. It waited quietly in their shared kitchen. Grace opened it carefully. The Waldmere Foundation cordially invites you to its annual Spring Gala, Guest of Honor. Nathan Hale, date April 22nd. She stared at the last line. +1, Ms. Grace Linwood, she ran her fingers over the words like they might vanish. That night, when Nathan returned from a board meeting, she held up the invitation silently. He smiled. "I was hoping you'd still want to go." Grace hesitated. "Are you sure I should?" Took her hand. "Not going unless you do." Her stomach fluttered. Not with nerves, but with something steadier. Trust. The night of the gala arrived, wrapped in soft spring air and velvet skies. This time, Grace didn't borrow anything. Her gown was a deep shade of emerald, sleek and understated. With delicate beading along the collar, she had chosen it herself not to impress, but because it made her feel strong. Her hair fell in soft waves, her heels steady. When Nathan saw her waiting by the car, his eyes widened. "You're stunning," he said. She smiled. "You're not so bad yourself." He wore a dark gray tuxedo, simple but elegant. But it wasn't the clothes that made her breath catch. It was the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the room. Even before they had entered one, the Waldmere ballroom looked the same in some ways. Glittering chandeliers, champagne towers, a crowd draped in opulence. But Grace didn't feel out of place now. Not because she had changed who she was, but because she had stopped hiding it as they stepped inside. She heard the whispers again, but this time they slid past her like raindrops on glass. Bryn was there too, predictably radiant in silver. Sequins. Her eyes narrowed when she saw Grace on Nathan's arm. But she said nothing. Maybe the last few headlines had taught her that Grace wasn't leaving. Nathan squeezed Grace's hand as they walked in, pausing briefly for a photographer. "Is this okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "It is now." Later that night, as the music softened into a slow jazz rhythm, Nathan pulled her gently onto the dance floor. They moved together without needing to talk. The room fell away. Her head rested on his shoulder. His hand at her waist felt warm, steady. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. "I've been waiting for this moment since the night you froze on that balcony." She laughed. "Remember? Thinking you were just a guy being polite?" He smiled. "And you were just a girl who didn't know she was unforgettable." They danced through one song, then another. Then came the fundraiser speech. Nathan was introduced by the host as visionary, leader, philanthropist. Grace stood at the edge of the crowd, watching him step up to the small stage. He took the microphone, adjusted it slightly, and looked out over the room. "Thank you for having me again," he began. "Last year I stood here feeling very alone. Wealth can build walls just as easily as it builds towers." A murmur of polite amusement followed, but something changed that night. I met someone who didn't know who I was. Someone who spoke about stories instead of headlines. Someone who wore a dress, not to impress, but because it was all she had, and still. She lit up the room more than any diamond ever could. Grace's heart stopped. He looked at her directly. "That person reminded me of what matters. Tonight, I want to thank her, not just for wearing my jacket once, but for sharing her world with me." Silence. Then slow, genuine applause. Grace blinked back tears. When Nathan stepped down, people reached out to shake his hand. But he moved straight to her. "I meant every word," he said. She nodded. Trying to speak through the lump in her throat, he led her to the balcony, the same one where they had first met. The city stretched before them again, this time alive. With spring warmth and twinkling buildings, a soft breeze passed. Without a word, Nathan took off his jacket and gently wrapped it around her shoulders. She looked up at him, laughing softly. "Dacia vu." He leaned in, his lips barely touching her forehead. "I lent you my jacket that night," he whispered, "but you stole my heart." She looked at him, really looked. And finally she spoke. "Then I guess I'm never giving it back." Epilogue 3. Months later, Grace's second short story was published, not in a small journal, but in a national magazine. The title? The borrowed moment. It opened with a girl in a borrowed dress on a cold balcony and ended with a jacket that never needed to be returned, because the love it wrapped around her had already become her own.